It is already mute.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my name is David Navarro and I work as Special Advisor to the Secretary General on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Climate Change. I welcome all of you on this truly historic day, the day when the landmark Paris Climate Agreement has entered into force. We appreciate that you've made the effort to be here today to join our Secretary General on this important occasion. Civil society has played an essential role in getting us to this moment. And we're going to have 11 civil society speakers joining us here and from all over the world this morning, thanks to live and recorded videos. They're representing groups from a wide range of constituencies, geographies, and approaches. And we've got a full 45 minutes together, so I'd like to straight away turn this over to the Secretary General, who will start us off with a few words, and then we'll turn to you, our guests, and our partners in implementing the agreement so that you can make your remarks. I hope you won't mind if I'm a bit rough on sticking to time, and with that, I offer the floor to the Secretary General.
Thank you, Dr. Navarro. Civil society leaders, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for your taking time on this very historic moment. The Paris Agreement is now in force. This is an emotional moment for me. It is a credit to all of you, and it is historic for the world. Thank you for coming here for such short notice so we can mark this milestone together. Thank you for standing behind me when I was having a press stakeout. Today we celebrate, reflect, and give thanks. I'm deeply grateful to all of you and your organizations representing millions of people. At a time when civil society is under attack in so many parts of the world, you have shown that citizens groups are essential partners for progress. Your vision, courage, persistence, and leadership made this day happen. Thank you all so much. Many of you joined me on this journey. I attended every United Nations Climate Change Conference. I traveled from Antarctica to the Arctic to many climate flashpoints in between. I met many vulnerable people. I will never forget the children who were scared. And I will always remember the powerful voices from civil society. In fact, we marched shoulder to shoulder in September 2014 when I convened Climate Summit meeting. billions of others held climate marches around the world. Your voices at that time was clearly heard to many leaders of the world who were attending climate summit meeting. You showed the climate challenge stakes and the solutions. You mobilized the hundreds of millions of people for the cause. We are still in a race against time. We need to transition to a low emissions and climate resilient future. So I ask every one of you to keep up the fight, hold governments accountable, and press for action. I would like to hear about your advocacy, activities, and other efforts to contribute to the Paris Agreement objectives. Please share your concerns and vision for the future. Tell me what you think is most important for the United Nations and the global community to prioritize going forward. Again, thank you very much for your leadership and commitment and engagement. And let us work together to make this world better for all. Thank you very much.
Secretary General, you heard the incredible warmth in that applause, and I think it's a sign that all of us really do appreciate the remarks you've just made and your gratitude to all of civil society for bringing the movement of popular support behind this incredible effort and the speed with which the whole of the world has got behind the COP21 agreement. And now we're going to have some interventions, and I'd first like to invite Kea Chatterjee, the Executive Director of the US Climate Action Network, on behalf of CAN International, give the first comment. Kea, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your leadership, Secretary General. I began my career in 2002 working at NASA, attempting to communicate climate science, an effort that was ultimately thwarted by a former ExxonMobil lawyer who was working in the White House at the time. I moved to civil society and to Climate Action Network because I realized that we could not do what we needed to do without a push from the outside. Today, as we celebrate the Paris Agreement, this historic and monumental moment that's critical, we still see that in this agreement that there is not concrete enforcement possible. It's not built in that there are fines. And so this is agreement in the end that relies on civil society's watchful eye to ensure that we do indeed avoid the worst ravages of climate change. And just as you said, the agreement relies on civil society to succeed at a time when civil society is under attack. From Bangladeshi villagers murdered as they're blocking a coal plant to indigenous leaders here in the US at Standing Rock being attacked by dogs and mace as they block a pipeline. Civil society is both literally and figuratively under attack. And I want to present two concrete ways that the UN can help us move forward. First, we need the help of the UN to promote, on the economics, to promote the full removal of fossil fuel subsidies. By 2020, in the G20, working with the German presidency moving forward. This is really a critical moment. Second, we need another heads of state summit, just as the one you had 2 years ago that enabled us to organize the massive march in New York City. We have the ability as civil society to speak truth to power, and the UN has the unique ability to convene power. So please help us as we move forward, as you have in the last 2 years, so that the lobbyists who blocked me early in my career do not prevail, and that we're able to move forward to implement the global goals that we put together in the Paris Climate Agreement. Thank you very much for your leadership.
I'm now hoping that we can be joined by Ms. Andrea Nava of Plant for the Planet from Guatemala. Welcome, and Andrea, you have the opportunity to speak now.
Okay.
You're connected. You are almost connected, but not quite. Let's try again.
Yes.
Thank you. You're connected.
Gracias al señor general.
Thank you to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, and the NGOs for their leadership and their efforts to solve the climate problem. My country is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. I'm involved in a project, Plant for the Planet, because I recognize the need to motivate and to bring awareness to young people that they need to work for the planet that we live in. Through this project, I've enjoyed learning about the responsibility of other young people. We need to set the example. In 2009, I joined Plant for the Planet, and we began to work on environmental projects. We carried out a number of environmental activities. We provided training to young people and taught them how to work for the environment. You can't imagine the impact that I've discovered and the potential that I've seen throughout my work. I remember in one of the workshops, I met a child, and he had a project. I told him he needed to create the project and have a logo, etc. And I explained the instructions to him. But this child did not know how to write. And he said, I can't write, but I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have another child help me. And he told the instructions to this other child who helped him out. And the other child was able to write for him. And the project involved using used material for new purposes. I was able to tell him that he was able to do something even though he thought he did not have the potential to do that. And there are many children who have not had an opportunity to show themselves. We have to create potential in our developing countries. We just need the opportunity to do so. When you take decisions for the planet, then you are taking advantage of this opportunity. Thank you.
Marla, that was Andrea Nava of Plant for the Planet, and now we'd like to invite Angie Fife, who is Executive Director of USA ICLEI, which is Local Governments for Sustainability. You have the floor.
Good morning, distinguished guests. It's a pleasure to be here. And Secretary General, on behalf of the ICLEI network of over 1,500 local governments around the globe, we want to thank you for your leadership, for championing the climate challenge attack, and we welcome the opportunity to work with the civil society actors here today. I'd like to give just a few examples of what local governments are doing on the ground around the globe to tackle the climate challenge. The ICLEI managed carbon registry, the Carbon Climate Registry, now has over 1 gigatons of commitments from local governments by 2020 to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Mayors across the world are joining the Global Compact of Mayors. And we know that one of the most important things that we can do is to decarbonize our electric power sector. So across the globe, we are seeing cities, for example, the Australian Capital Territory, up to Vancouver, making commitments to go 100% renewable energy. And in fact, the city of Aspen, Colorado has successfully transitioned their electric power sector to 100% renewable energy as of 2015. We're also seeing cities working very diligently towards demand reduction, improving their buildings, going to net zero energy buildings. In Mexico City, we see action through the Sustainable Energy for All initiative, the Building Efficiency Accelerator, where Mexico City is implementing new policies and programs around building efficiency. Emissions are going down and carbon sinks going up through land use and forestry. This is happening in part through our ICLEI Africa Secretariat, who leads our biodiversity work and Nature for Cities. Sustainable production and consumption. and the circular economy is a path towards reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And we're happy to have several leading cities in our Sustainable Public Procurement Leaders Network, Seoul, Helsinki, Cape Town, and Denver, for example. So a sustainable lifestyle, of course, requires behavior change. And how do we create this visualization for citizens around the world to embrace what it is we have to offer? One of the ways that ICLEI is doing this is through our eco-mobility program, where we take one neighborhood for 1 month and remove all cars. This was done last year in Johannesburg, 2 years ago in Suwon, Republic of Korea. And it ensures that we have efficient, safe, and advanced mobility options. Of course, all of this needs to be underpinned by finance. The Transformative Actions Program at ICLEI has gathered 125 applications from cities across the world who have projects in mitigation, adaptation across all sectors that are looking for finance. And we look forward to working with our fellow civil society members here and the private sector towards helping those actions be financed. And finally, we see that cities are knitting together mitigation, adaptation, disaster risk reduction in a bit of a safety net to ensure that this transition to a decarbonized economy is inclusive and equitable and just. And so we would call on the United Nations and the nations themselves to devote budgets, policies, and programs to climate action that further support this work at the city level, and to bring cities into that action so that we may move faster and farther together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing with us these multiplier examples of just how you've been able to encourage the building of momentum. And now we go again by live video conference to link up with Mr. Emad Adli, the General Coordinator of the Arab Network for Environment and Development. We can see you well. You have the floor now, sir.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Mr. Secretary General for the leadership and also for taking all the initiatives and all the work he has to go through to reach this achievement. We are all celebrating the results, but also we know that, as he said, that this was a fight that we all shared in achieving it. I'm talking to you from Egypt, from the Arab region, and I send you all the greetings of the people who are really suffering of the impacts of climate change, especially when we are talking about adaptation. The issue of drought and flooding became a very prominent in this area, and we are all suffering that even people are talking at some point that conflicts in the region are coming from a source of climate changes and also from drought at some point. The civil society in the Arab region, they have managed in the last few years to establish and to implement many projects in the area of mitigation. So we have many good examples in relation to use of renewable energy, and dealing with biomass, and also activities on sustainable transport. But at the same time, we are having projects that have dealt with the climate-induced displacement. And I have a model that we implemented here in Egypt on the northwest part of Egypt that helped many communities on increasing their resilience and building their capacity and building this kind of dialogue to be established between the local authorities, the central government, and the communities on helping the communities to be more resilient towards actions related to drought, especially in this area. But at the same time, the civil society needs to be taken as partners. This is the only challenge that we are facing. It's also budget and money, as was mentioned before. But if we are considered as real partners, as we see it in the United Nations, we are going to have more impact, and we will help our communities to be more reached and more served. So this is what we need as a plea from the United Nations to help and facilitate this process of partnerships between the civil society and their governments. This will help us to advocate, to mainstream, to monitor, to implement, and also to support our communities. I thank you very much, and I hope that this kind of process and partnership between the United Nations will grow more and more, and we will have more good results in the future. And I'm going to Marrakesh in a couple of days, and I hope in Marrakesh we will start the implementation. Thank you very much.
Shukran, Mr. Adli. Thank you very much for sharing with us the important work that you're doing on adaptation, the link between climate change and security, and the value of partnering with civil society so that, as we've heard from others as well, the necessary advocacy takes place. I'd now like to come to Naomi Adjes. Naomi is there. We'd very much like to hear from you as a climate liability campaigner with Greenpeace, your commentary. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. I'm here on behalf of our international executive directors and the entire Greenpeace organization. Thank you for convening this meeting and for the opportunity to speak. It's a day of hope for us as the Paris Agreement comes into force. It's a remarkable achievement and a vital step forward in international cooperation on climate change. And we'd like to personally thank the Secretary General for his leadership and commitment in bringing us to this day. Your hard work over the past year did not go unnoticed by civil society, and we wouldn't be here without the work that you did and the hard work of the people in this room. We also know how important it was to have heads of state engaged all the way through, and we hope that level of engagement continues as we bring Paris to life. We also know that there's a lot of work for civil society to do in bringing Paris forward and making it a reality. And so the organizations in this room are working to move the world away from fossil fuels. We're building a new future with people at the center. We know that existing fossil fuel projects will push us past 2 degrees, so we're mobilizing around the world to keep it in the ground and stop development of any new fossil fuel projects. We're also highlighting the possibilities of solutions of renewable energy for people, from our Energy Revolution report to the ship that we brought to Lebanon, Turkey, and Morocco in advance of the COP, highlighting the potential for solar in the region for the people. And finally, we're demanding climate leadership from corporations and governments in a post-Paris world. We have to make sure that fossil fuel interests do not supplant people in the political process, and we need to design and improve domestic legal systems so that the Paris commitments are not just upheld, but are used to actively move governments forward and move the planet forward. And at the center of all of this, at the center of all of our work, are people. We see that they want action and they want change and they want to be a part of it. And we need them to believe that that new future is possible and that they have the tools to achieve it. So thank you very much for convening this meeting, and we hope that you'll be engaged in that process with us going forward.
Thank you very much, Naomi Adjes, for reflecting that this is a day of hope, for stressing the hard work to get here, but really making sure that as we move forward, it's people at the centre. Thank you so much. And now we'd like to go to Farah Kabir. Now, according to what I can see in front of me, Ms. Farah Kabir, the Country Director of ActionAid Bangladesh, is connected, though I don't think we can see her. Farah, if you can hear us, please come in and make your remarks now.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I couldn't connect over video, and thank you to the Secretary for his leadership in our fight for climate justice. ActionAid welcomes the coming into force of this Paris Agreement today, less than a year after it was negotiated. And the momentum to bring the agreement to this point has been remarkable, and it's a multi-stakeholder, concerted and collective effort, I think, which sends a signal to politicians and industries alike that we have to build a new world. And this is an opportunity. The New Deal is not enough to keep the planet and the people safe. And even if it's fully implemented, commitment under the current INDCs will only serve to keep the planet to 3 degrees of warming. However, the Paris deal has been agreed, and it is an opportunity that we should work together to keep the warming under 1.5 degrees. It is clear that any chance of doing this, we need to make the most of the next precious years to accelerate action. We cannot wait for the Paris Agreement phase to begin in a few years. I work with the most vulnerable and the communities in the front line, and their lives are being impacted today, and it was impacted yesterday. So it is very difficult to have a conversation that the Paris Agreement and our efforts for making the changes will be coming into force in a few years. The demand from the ground, from the civil society and the women and the youth is, how can we do something now? It is very important that we make the connection and recognize the interconnectedness between the agreements that came into, that has been adopted in 2015. And we make that connection with SFDRR and SDG. It is absolutely critical to invest in women and youth and the communities in the front line. Climate-induced displacement is an issue that we are trying to deal with today. And to work with such issues and upcoming problems, it is very important to invest in women and youth. And we have, through our work, found how women leadership has, the first responders, made a difference in the community. All this requires a serious political commitment and finances. We would like to see through your leadership and your office that finances are agreed and investments are made for a green and better world. Appropriate mechanisms at national, regional, and international levels are being discussed, but they need to be supported with finance, technical skills, and capacity building. We would hope that in COP22, the global leaders will unpack the global goal on adaptation and the finance needed to ensure this, keeping in view the implementation of the mitigation goal, which will affect temperatures and the climate impact. We are really at that point in our life when we cannot take time to implement or to wait for others to come and take action. We have to work and show our leadership today. And I feel that through your office, if we really invested in women and youth, we will be able to make that change. I am now at the AMCDRR, where the Asian ministers are discussing how to deal with disaster risk reduction and how to engage the private sector, the local government. These are steps that are coming a bit late, but better late than never. And I thank you all for giving me this opportunity to speak to you.
So, thank you, Farah Kabir, for reminding us that you're a witness to suffering. You're seeing people who've been displaced by climate change. You're focusing on the key contribution of women and youth, the urgency. These are precious years, you said, for mobilizing finance and undertaking political action. And you say that we must take advantage of the opportunity that exists now. And now I'd like to move to John Sturman, Senior Advisor, Climate Interactive, and Professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Sloan School of Management, as well as Director of MIT's System Dynamics Group. John Sturman, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for the opportunity to share in this great day. I am, as you said, a professor at MIT, and I direct the Sustainability Initiative at the MIT Sloan School of Management. Today, though, I am also proud to represent a group of civil society organizations, including the Union of Concerned Scientists, the Carbon Tracker Initiative, Climate Central, and the group I work with, Climate Interactive. Through our work and that of many other groups, people all around the world now know that the Paris Agreement coming into force today is both a giant step forward and at the same time that greater ambition, earlier, deeper emissions cuts are needed to create a world in which all can thrive, and that we can do it. Each of our organizations contributes to this vital work. Climate Central translates the best available science for the public, showing, for example, how rising sea level will devastate many of the world's great cities unless we act now. The Union of Concerned Scientists translates complex scientific and policy issues with rigor and clarity, speaking truth to power since 1969. Carbon Tracker has shown that the vast majority of fossil fuel reserves are grossly overvalued, and how companies can create wealth by embracing the clean energy revolution now underway. And the Climate Interactive MIT team creates free interactive simulations enabling people to learn for themselves what each nation must do, what we all must do to limit warming to well below 2 degrees. Many of us will be in Marrakesh continuing our work with policymakers and negotiators, but we also know that broad public support for action is essential. And we know that we cannot simply tell people that the climate is changing, people are hurting, and action is urgently needed. Research shows that showing people research doesn't work. So we develop interactive tools that empower people to learn for themselves, tools such as Climate Interactive's World Climate Workshop, in which people play the roles of the negotiators, then test their proposals immediately with the Sea Roads interactive simulator we've developed, explore sea level rise through Climate Central's work, and learn the science and economics through the work of UCS and Carbon Tracker. Mr. Secretary General, earlier this year, you yourself recognized the importance of this work when you stated, and I quote, "I strongly welcome efforts to educate, inspire, and involve all sectors of society in creating the solutions we need to meet the climate challenge. Powerful and widely accessible climate tools available at no charge and easily utilized by citizens from all countries can make a useful contribution," unquote. We are profoundly grateful to you and all those who brought forth the Paris Agreement, and we pledge to redouble our efforts to turn that promise into reality. Thank you.
Each person speaking today in a few words is summarizing an enormous amount of work and careful thought. And thank you for reminding us that it's no good just presenting research. You have to enable people to find out for themselves through self-learning tools. Very clear. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Secretary General, we're now going to hear some pre-recorded video messages from people who've been working with you on this issue. First of all, we've got a short video from Sharon Burrow, the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation.
Today is an historic milestone. On behalf of the ITUC and 180 million trade union members around the world, we commit to the Paris Agreement. But it must be that the industrial transformation, a massive shift in the way we conduct our economies, our production, transport and logistics, construction, agriculture, all of the major industries, there must be a just transition. We will be at the table where governments are serious, where employers are serious about the transition. 3 things are vital. 1, governments must raise their ambition. We must see national and industry plans for a just transition. And we must indeed share the finance and the technology to make it possible for people everywhere. We celebrate today, but the commitment to act is upon us.
So from Sharon Burrow, ambition, justice, finance and technology being shared. Key words here. And now we hear from Alina Sabah, researcher from the Mughal Indigenous Women's Upliftment Institute. Off you go. Have we got Alina Sabah? Here she comes.
Good morning, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and my civil society friends. I'm sorry I can't be there to attend this important meeting, but thank you very much for allowing me to contribute from Nepal. Indigenous women in Nepal are taking action to defend our earth and to adapt to extreme weather changes already impacting on our lives and livelihoods. We are asking questions and sharing answers. Who is causing climate change, and why do those who contributed least to global warming suffer the worst consequences? What parts of our traditional knowledge will help us survive, and what do we need to learn and change? How can knowledge of agroecology will help the world better understand the planet Earth? And how can we share other knowledge and resources to support indigenous women? How can we create a feminist, fossil fuel-free future that allows indigenous women not just to survive but to thrive? If humans are going to have a future on this planet, it will have to be one where indigenous women are respected, organized, and powerful. The exploitation of indigenous peoples has always been tied with the exploitation of the earth because we are seen as a barrier to profit, a barrier to development. When we thrive, humanity will survive. So, our most urgent and important strategy is to organize our communities locally, globally, and take back the power. Thank you.
So that was Alina Saha talking from Kathmandu, Nepal. And now we go to Winnie Byanyima, Executive Director of Oxfam International.
Ready. My name is Winnie Byanyima. I'm the Executive Director of Oxfam International. Secretary General, in Paris, governments led by the ambition of the developing countries struck a historic agreement. As it enters into force, the real test is whether it delivers for those people least responsible for climate emissions. It is the poorest, and particularly women on the front lines, who are suffering most from the results of the emissions of the richest. Women smallholder farmers like those in Zimbabwe whom Oxfam works with. Today, about 40 million people in Southern Africa are at risk of hunger because of El Nino, which is supercharged by climate change. At Oxfam, we are playing our part. We're supporting these communities, and we are holding governments accountable for the climate finance commitments that they have made. Secretary General, our new research shows that just 16% of total climate funds is going to adaptation. Less than 1/5 of the total funding, climate financing, is reaching the poorest people. That is costing lives. Secretary General, the spirit of Paris must persevere. It must compel governments to do more to prioritize climate adaptation and the needs of the poorest people because they did the least to cause the climate crisis. Thank you very much.
Adaptation and justice, a theme that's come through now from several of our speakers. And now we go to Kathy Jetnil-Kijina, who is an instructor in the College of the Marshall Islands and the co-director of DGACM.
This is Kathy Jetnil-Kijina speaking to you from the Marshall Islands, specifically from my backyard. I'd like to thank the UN Secretary General for giving me the opportunity to speak. It's through your leadership in this climate movement that has given me the platform to speak at all. If it wasn't for the climate summit back in 2014, I know that I would not be where I am today. It has been a crazy whirlwind these past 2 years. It's been exhausting. It's been soul-wrenching work. But I'm so grateful that I get to do it. And I know that it's a privilege. And I'm trying my best to share that privilege with others, which is why I'm happy to share that we've been able to raise $80,000 in the past couple months for a youth center for our nonprofit environmentalist organization, DGACM, which will be the first, which will be a home for our youth to empower them to share their stories. Because it shouldn't just be me speaking out there. It should be, they have so much more stories than I do. They carry an ocean of knowledge and stories. And it spills forth from their mouth when you just give them the opportunity to speak. So moving forward into COP22, I'm looking for more opportunities to share their stories. So it shouldn't be, so it's not just me. And I will continue to write, I will continue to perform, and I will continue to hone my craft so that I can tell that story that much better. My first collection of poetry is coming out in February. And I hope that it captures the complex, layered realities of being a Marshallese, living with a nuclear legacy and struggling against a climate-threatened future. Moving forward, I hope we continue to share these stories. I hope we continue to reach out and connect. It's that connection that will save us.
I know that some of these, actually all of these videos came in early this morning. And I really thank all those who took such a lot of time and trouble to assemble the videos and to do that lovely effect where you get the words as well as the pictures. Thank you. And now, Mr. Secretary General, we'd like to invite you to just reflect a bit on what you've heard and then to close out the session because we know you're really busy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank all distinguished civil society leaders who have made an excellent contribution this morning in person, through video, through telephone, and I'm very much touched by your strong commitment. It's a real collaborative discussions that adds meaning to this day. Hearing from you, I'm hopeful. One can be extremely excited today. We can be hopeful, but most important thing from today will be how to translate our agreement into action. I've been pushing world leaders, let's agree. This, we have some sheets of paper. This should be honored by political commitment. If not, it's just some paper, very well written, you know. But all this good meaning should be translated. That's what we have to do. That's what I'm asking you. You are the ears and eyes and voices of our world. So I'm asking you all to be vigilant and forceful and straightforward. Normally, we have all titles, you know. Some of you have titles, official titles like a professor or something like this. But your official titles are normal. This is private, informal, unofficial titles, while we have official titles. Official titled people have a lot of restrictions, I cannot speak all what sometimes I have to speak, I want to speak. Sometimes I am pushed back very strongly by media or political leaders, as you see during these few days from a certain country in Africa. When I decide something, there's always pushback, repercussions. But you are like kings and queens without crown. Of course, you said you are under attack. There are many civil society leaders who are detained, arrested, and sentenced to jail, or very, very dangerous. But we are the ones, human rights defenders and United Nations and many countries are defending you. So let's work as one team. And I think business community, private sector, should also be fully engaged. Without the private sector's full engagement and changing their business operations toward the low carbon economy and climate resilient path, that we will never be able to do that. So I'm asking you to speak out. There are many issues you raised. First, I think we have to have resources. More importantly, financial resources to help mitigate and adapt by the developing countries who do not have means. It's unfair that those countries who have not contributed much would be most hit and do not have any support. when we were calculating all this, very interesting, calculating this global greenhouse gas emission rate, how many percentage this country is emitting. When we added up 20 countries, I was informed that, well, SG, we have a 20 countries. Wow, that's good. Then how much percentage have we reached to reach 55%? 0.0%. What do you mean by 0%? It's a 0.00%. There are many countries whose rate in global calculation counts 0.00. 0.00. Many countries, particularly like Marshall Island, all these small island Pacific countries, very vulnerable, poorest countries, they're just nothing, non-existence. They exist as a country, they exist to be affected only, not causing. They're not causing anything. And only with China and the United States, two countries, they added up 39%. That's the point where we've been adding up. Now we have a 70%, 98 countries, as I said this morning, but we will have to go. We have about just one country less than 50%. Out of 197 state parties, 98 today. We hope that Japan will do it very soon. Anyway, that's what I really wanted to say. I am very much committed until last day of my mandate to work for this mobilizing $100 billion by 2020. And in Marrakesh, we'll have to have a good formula how we can mobilize $100 billion. And some of you said the education. There is a very important point. Then when you try to convince adults, already educated, or whatever positions they may be, it's very hard to convince them because they have their own way of thinking. If we teach them from elementary school children, students, middle school, high school, college, on climate change and importance of sustainable development goals, then that's the best way. That's the best way. Most effective, but it takes time. We have to long-term. That's why yesterday we've been discussing this matter. So I'm going to instruct our country director, resident coordinators all around the world to negotiate and urge the countries, member states of the United Nations to put some curriculum. If not every day, at least once a week, they should be taught climate change and how they can contribute as young citizens when they are grown up for this world. That's what we are also doing. We have a very good frameworks. This Addis Ababa Action Agenda for financing for development. We have a very good one for Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. When I heard from our representative from Bangladesh, I immediately thought about disaster risk. Bangladesh, there used to be tens of thousands of people who were killed during monsoon season. In 2008, when there was a cyclone Nagis in Myanmar, in just 2-3 days, 230,000 people died. Can you believe? All this inundation just swept the people to death. The Bangladesh used to be, India used to be that countries. Just every season, every year, they have monsoons without unwanted visitors. Tens of thousands of people. Now, with the wise investment in disaster risk reduction, Bangladesh has reduced the number of people death drastically. Now some thousands are like this. Even thousands are too many. But when it comes to 100,000, there is usually death in any way. So disaster risk reduction, we have a framework. Now we have a sustainable development. Climate change is a part of this, SDGs, number 13. Then we have a special, separate agreement. This is a binding agreement. So we have to be hopeful. We have to be proud to have achieved this one. I really appreciate on all your strong commitment. So just to speak out, just before concluding, I'd like to draw your attention about this conference room 8. You are sitting in a very meaningful, historic conference room. Just look at the panels around this. You will see something very meaningful to the course we have been working, we are going to work. I am inspired. I'm inspired by the foresight of our forefathers, founding fathers, when they designed this one. This is not normal design. This was a design not for just a beautiful panel. You see all different kinds of plans. When United Nations was founded in 1945, our founding fathers knew that there is something very seriously important one. So they gave this already very philosophical meaning, very visionary designs. That's why when I first convened the Climate Change Summit meeting in 2007, I've been thinking where I should convene this meeting. Of course, the big meeting was held in the General Assembly chamber. I invited some 30 world leaders representing big emitters, representing small island developing countries, mid-income countries, all representative. Big countries, small countries, medium countries. They are the ones who can really be the driving force and agents of changes. So I invited 30 leaders here, exactly this room. I drew their attention. Just please look at around. You are sitting in this room. This has already a meaning. It's something like you are reading a book in the library, big classical old libraries where all these ancient books are stored. And then let's be inspired by the foresight of our founding fathers. They have already given us instruction. You should do this one, even though they were not able to do it at that time. But now, with all this awareness and importance and impact which is now coming to us, we have to work. Let's work together again to make this world better for environmentally sustainable for our succeeding generation. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You notice our Secretary General did not follow a word of the notes that we carefully wrote for him, and we were rewarded with reflections and inspiration that were really special. And so on this historic day, in this historic room, on behalf of all of us who work here in the United Nations, we thank you, the kings and queens without crowns, for joining us from near and from afar. And we'd like to thank Susan Altsner and her colleagues in the Non-Governmental Liaison Service. We'd like to thank our Department of Public Information, led by Christina Gallach. We'd like to thank our fabulous conference services and also our interpretation services, who actually enabled us to have quite a complicated meeting without any little glitches. Thank you all. We'd like to thank those of you who helped to put the event together. I'd particularly like to thank our colleague Cynthia Scharf and also our colleague Haldor Thorgerson and the team who've now taken over the climate change support work. But most of all, in a rather emotional moment, I'd like to thank our Secretary General once more as he leaves to get on with his day. Please enjoy this moment, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.